You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello everyone, thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. So excited to be here with Rachel. How you doing?
I'm doing so great. Kirk, next week, it's so exciting.
What's happening next week, Rachel?
Next week is 200.
200 what?
200 episodes. We've done
That's
this for almost
right.
200 episodes, Kirk.
That is pretty wild. Yeah, episode 199. It's the last, our last episode in Wonderland before we move on to the 200s. Pretty cool. Thanks for being along on this journey with me.
Yeah.
Victoria's not with us here this week, but she'll be back next week for episode 200. And so here's the thing. This week's topic is kind of fitting that this is like episode 199 because when we sat down to make this podcast,
Right.
I made up a list of, some of the topics I wanted to talk about. And this one I don't think it was in that initial list. There are some I still haven't gotten to, but this has been on my list for a long time. So This is one that's finally coming off the list.
All right. All right. You know what, Kirk? Mine is very similar as well. It's been on my list for a long time.
Interesting. I was kind of waiting to see if better information came along before passing it on to you, our dear listeners, and it hasn't, but I'm going to do it anyways. So this week I'm talking about an animal that I have never seen in my life because it lives nowhere near me, but it may live near some of you. I also don't see any of the relatives of this species this time of year because winter is fast approaching and most of the relatives of this species die when winter comes to my home. I'm talking about hornets.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
I'm intrigued, Kirk. We've talked about wasps a lot and bees.
I guess now is a good time to point out. So people were like, wasp, hornets, bees, what's the difference in all these things? All hornets are wasps, but not all wasps are hornets.
Kind of like how all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares.
In fact, it's exactly like that. Exactly. So there is something kind of fun that happened recently as all the leaves started to fall off the trees in my yard over the last month here in the Northland. My wife was looking out our back windows and asked, is that a hornet nest? And sure enough, once the leaves were gone, we could see a huge hornet nest hanging from a small, I think it was like a maple tree in my neighbor's yard, about 15 feet off the ground. This is the bald-faced hornet nest.
Oh, good.
And if you've ever watched cartoons like Winnie the Pooh, where he tries to get out onto a branch, get to a large rugby ball looking nest kind of hanging from a branch
that clearly
to get the
is
honey.
dripping with honey, yeah.
Yeah, I have really bad news for poor Pooh Bear.
Yep.
That is not a beehive. Honeybees nest inside of hollow trees. That's a bald-faced hornet nest. It doesn't contain any honey.
You're gonna have some problems.
Yeah, it contains only pain. So just a lesson for everyone not to get your nature education from cartoons. But with that said, I mentioned that this week's animal is one that I have never seen in person, so it certainly is not a bald-faced hornet.
Right.
It's actually their cousin, the Oriental Hornet, Vespa orientalis.
Okay.
And these are found over a pretty good chunk of the world, kind of from the Middle East all the way through Southeast Asia. It's quite a few countries where these are found. I think even at one point they were, and maybe even in parts of Africa, they were in Madagascar at one point, but aren't found there anymore. So they've got a pretty wide range, just not where I live. And I want to clear up one other thing right away, that this is not the same animal as the murder hornet, which got a lot of media attention a few years ago.
Right.
That's the giant Asian hornet. I want to talk about the Oriental hornet. The so-called murder hornet, which people were afraid of because they were so big, is about 45 millimeters long, about 2 inches.
No.
While the Oriental, it's real big. While the Oriental Hornet tops out at about 35 millimeters, so it's not a tiny hornet, but not as big as the murder hornet. And also, unlike bald-faced hornets in my neighborhood, they don't live up in a tree. They make their nest underground.
Oh, good.
And yeah, right, where you can step on them.
Uh-huh.
They look like, they look like a hornet, like a pretty classic body shape for all hornets and wasps for that matter. But coloration-wise, one thing that sets them apart is that they have a brown body, not a black body. So it's really kind of this kind of pretty reddish brown color on most of their body, but they have a bright yellow face and then a wide yellow band across the tail end of their abdomen. It's got maybe 2 little black dots on that band and like a little cute little V-shaped notch out of the top, but essentially a yellow band down at the tail end.
Mm-hmm.
And that yellow band, Rachel, might just be extra strange. So I want to look at a few pieces of interesting evidence this week. So first off, most species of hornets are active first thing in the morning, before the sun gets really intense. But for Oriental hornets, this isn't the case. They love the sun. In fact, they are a digging hornet, and they do most of their digging when the sun is highest in the sky. And scientists have studied this. There's actually a direct correlation between the intensity of sunlight and how hard they work on their nests. The more intense the sun gets, the harder they work.
Huh.
Pretty kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a that's interesting. Well, maybe they just like the sun, right? I mean, a team of that could just be they like the sun. But a team of researchers has uncovered some other interesting evidence, and it has to do with that yellow stripe on their abdomen.
Okay.
You see, when they studied this, they found that yellow stripe contains xanthopterin, which is what makes it yellow. It's a yellow pigment that's found in that yellow section. Surprise, surprise, that's why it's yellow.
Right.
But there's 15 layers to the cuticle that make up the exoskeleton in the yellow part. There's actually more like, I think, 30 layers in the brown part, but the yellow part is only 15 layers thick. Oh. And what researchers showed, at least experimentally, is that when you measure from the top layer of the cuticle to the bottom, there is an electric potential difference between the top and bottom layers, which seems to be due to this xanthopterin in the cuticle. So the researchers propose that maybe, just maybe, the hornets are at least partially solar powered.
What?
Which, I know, which may explain their preference to work when it is sunniest. What does that do for you?
I mean, okay. We figured out solar power and such. It's not like that's it.
Usually we think of plants, right? Like,
but it's not.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Now let's dive into this a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I do need to point out that the electric potential they measured is incredibly small. It's incredibly inefficient. Mm-hmm. The efficiency of conversion to electricity was said to be 0.335%, which is not great. For reference, photosynthesis is 3 to 6% efficient. So we're talking at least an order of magnitude more energy that plants are getting out of photosynthesis as compared to this sort of maybe thing that's going on in the hornets. A solar-powered animal would be strange indeed. There are a few examples, but most are symbiotic relationships with algae and not what is being proposed here. As a fun side note, I did find a few references to people claiming that cats are technically passive solar collectors because they'll lay out in the sunlight and use some of the heat energy to warm their body so their metabolic energy can be used for other purposes.
Yeah.
So maybe cats are like passively solar powered, but that's like a whole other,
there's a whole other
wormhole
topic
to go down. But I came across that and I was like, that's kind of interesting.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
I'll ask
but here's
my
the
cat.
thing. Are Oriental hornets solar powered? That's the real question.
Right.
And there are 2 more pieces of evidence. So first up are the xanthopterins, I think it is, themselves.
Okay.
So pterans or pterans, there's a P, but it's pterans. Although different varieties, because there's many different varieties of these types of compounds, are involved in both photoreception and phototransduction in places like the eyes. So that's interesting. We see other examples where similar, chemicals are involved in light-related things in animals, right? So you kind of go, okay, there's something about this sort of class of things that could have some interactions with light. That's interesting, not conclusive, but interesting. Pterans may also play a role in photosynthesis, which again, intriguing.
Yeah.
Not necessarily proof of anything, but they at least play part. They have some part in that role. So kind of intriguing. And another little thing that came up, some of the researchers who were working on this also did some other, papers where they talked about Oriental hornets having a thermoregulatory organ. So many insects have the ability to control their body temperature. They are endotherms like humans, but like in a different way. So we regulate our body temperature to almost always be the same, unless your body's purposely giving you a fever because you're sick or something, right?
Right.
Usually the goal is to keep us just totally the same temperature. Whereas insects don't do that. They're going to sometimes just let their body fluctuate with ambient air temperature, much like the old school would say cold-blooded, but an ectothermic animal would do.
Right.
But if they're gonna fly and they need to warm up, they'll actually literally have this system where they can heat their bodies up before flying and then fly away. So insects do have this ability to regulate their body temperature. And these same researchers, or some of them at least, who are doing the study on electrical potential difference in the yellow part of the cuticle, have speculated that the thermoregulatory organ of the Oriental wasp is powered, at least in part, by this electrical activity. I don't think they've proven that. I think it's sort of speculative, but this would be pretty amazing. But again, I'm going to put a big but out there. This has not been proven. There's a lot of speculation going on. This is really early days in some of this research. And I've been holding off on this story, hoping that some new research would come out, like some other group of scientists would be studying this, and I'd find either evidence to support or debunk this theory. But there really hasn't been anything, in the last few years that's kind of, or ever since this came out, that I could find that either supported or refuted this. The lines of evidence are intriguing. And it goes to show that there's a lot we don't understand about how animals work. We know more now than ever before in human history. That also means that we know that there's a whole lot more that we don't know, right? Like the more you know, the more you don't know.
The more you realize, I don't know
this is so much more
anything.
complicated than we thought. Right.
Right.
So systems are incredibly complex in both plants and animals. We do not understand them all yet. So I applaud these researchers for looking into this. It may all end up being interesting, but ultimately fruitless. That's just how science works sometimes. There actually is this tiny electrical potential that we can measure, but the animal really hasn't found any way to make use of it. That's totally a possibility.
Kind of cool, but we haven't seen anything happen yet.
So we need to check everything to kind of know the truth. So I'll say solar-powered hornets? Maybe. Time will tell on this one. So keep your eyes and ears open. Hopefully we'll learn more. There's at least a possibility that there are partially solar-powered hornets out there, which I think is pretty rad.
It is very
the primary
cool.
source for this is the write-up of the study on the hornets. It's called Solar Energy Harvesting in the Epicuticle of the Oriental Hornet Vespa orientalis. Obviously, the people who wrote it are pretty convinced this is a real thing. I'm not sure everyone else is, but this was in Naturwissenschaften, volume 79, for those who are curious. And then I also had some general information from Wikipedia. So that's what I got this week.
Awesome. Thanks, Kirk.
Not a problem. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, it'll be Rachel's turn.
Woohoo! All right, welcome back to the show, everyone. Kirk.
Yeah.
we cannot reach 200 episodes without covering this. We can't.
Oh,
I refuse.
Okay. What have we missed in the last 198 episodes, Rachel?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, this is one that's been on my list for forever since we originally sat down and started thinking of different topics. And it doesn't.
It's so funny that we both ended up in like a situation like that.
Well, I think we both were like, it's almost 200 episodes. We can't keep this on.
Something's been on the list too long. Yeah.
And
I'm so curious what it is.
It's not super strange, but we have to. Today, I'm talking about the largest creature to ever live on the planet that we call home, the blue whale. We haven't talked about it yet, Kirk.
Dude, the fact that they are the largest animal ever. Is strange enough.
Not just like the largest whale. They are the largest animal to
I think we
ever
think
live.
about like, I wish I lived when the dinosaurs were around and we could see these huge animals. No, the biggest one ever is here right now.
There's like a ton of them in the ocean right now.
Yeah.
Wild. And
awesome.
This actually
tell us more about them.
Oh, I will. This actually harkens back to way back when I did, oh my gosh, this is early on when I did a entire whale evolution type episode. That was a weird one for me.
Oh yeah, that was way back. Yeah.
I don't think we even cracked 100 for that one.
Right.
So I went into this with some background knowledge just because I love the ocean and its weirdness
Rachel,
that it provides us.
You don't. Anyone who's listening to the show long enough you don't need to tell them that.
I know.
It's very apparent that you're into the ocean.
I know. And it's so fun. It just keeps giving, Kirk. But
it is, yeah.
Even with that, I couldn't wrap my head around the sheer scale of a blue whale.
No.
No. So let's dive in. Yes, that was on purpose, Kirk. Blue whales are a species of marine mammal. They're one of the baleen whales, which means that they have baleen, not teeth. Baleen are made of they're not teeth. They're not specialized teeth. They're these thin strands that come in and kind of create like a sieve for whales to be able to filter water out, but food stays in. Whereas like a sperm whale is a toothed whale. So a lot of the largest creatures out there are baleen whales, which is wild which is wild on its own, right?
Yeah, we've talked about that. How it's when I talked about the manta rays, how it seems counterintuitive that these things that eat things that are so small become so big.
Literally, like next point in my note is I find it vastly ironic. These huge creatures rely on the smallest food, krill, which manta rays do as well, right? Absolutely wild that they rely on. Like, they're maybe not as small as maybe we think. I always think of them as like this microscopic type food. Krill can really vary in size, but which is its own topic on what krill is. They're in the same arthropod group as crabs and shrimp and things like that, but they vary so much, and I don't have time to get into krill.
Yeah, well, I'll say some of the ones I saw being eaten right in front of my face during that manta ray experience, which you can hear about on the podcast, were several inches long. I mean, the big ones were sizely.
Exactly.
They weren't,
Yeah. So what's really big, what is good to know about a blue whale and why it's so special, why I'm finally talking about it on the podcast, is when you identify a whale, there's tons of different whale species out there. This creature is long and slender. It's defined primarily by its sheer size, and that is blue-gray all over with a lighter underbelly. It does potentially have up to 5 subspecies of blue whale that have been recognized by science. The 5th one is debatable at the moment, but there's for sure 4.
Okay.
like subspecies of blue whale. And that being said, they've actually been found to hybridize with fin whales as well,
Oh, okay.
which is fascinating in its own right because it actually contributed to one, it helps prevent some bottlenecking issues with blue whales because as of right now, there's like 15,000 blue whales on the planet,
Okay.
which isn't a small number, but isn't a large number either. The hybridization of blue whales and fin whales have actually contributed to like 30 something % of the blue whale DNA, but that's getting into the weeds.
Sure.
They can and they do migrate all over the world. They stick near the poles for summer feasting, and then they go to the tropics to breed. Honestly, what a life. But let's talk about size, Kirk.
Yes.
This is really where we get into the strange for blue whales. So a full-grown blue whale, on average, is about 88 feet long, but they can get up to 100 feet long, or
Yeah,
30
it's
meters
nuts.
long. And then they can weigh up to 200 tons, which is about 200,000 pounds, or 200 tons, or 181,437 kilograms is how much they can weigh, which that's a lot. Ugh.
Yeah.
So, but those numbers don't mean anything, right? Like those, you can tell that they're large, but that doesn't
Sure.
mean anything. So let's break
I
it
have,
down.
well, I would say I have a little bit of context because one of my relatives,
Mhm.
I'm not sure if she still is, but at the time when I was in Norway last, was working for the University Museum at the University of Bergen.
Mhm.
And in the natural history, it's a natural history museum, and they have a blue whale skeleton
Oh.
hanging from the ceiling that is 24 meters long.
Oh.
And so I got to go, into the museum like
Mhm.
after hours and just like stand under this giant skeleton and be like, okay, yeah, that's
Mhm.
large.
And
So,
that's not even how big they can get.
No, they can get even bigger. That's just the one the museum had. So I have like some frame of reference in my mind, but even then, that's just the skeleton. It doesn't. It's hard. Having seen it, it's still hard to visualize. So give us some help here for those of us who don't have the privilege of visiting the University of Bergen. What are we talking here?
So 100 feet or 30 meters is equal to about 18 Rachels stacked up on top of each other.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of Rachels. I don't think the world can handle that many Rachels. It's also
Definitely not.
equivalent. Absolutely not. It's also equivalent to 3 yellow school buses, end to end to end, all together.
That's helpful because Americans will do anything to avoid using the metric system, and a school bus is a standard unit of measurement more than metric is here.
Exactly.
Bizarrely.
I figured that would be helpful, right?
How many school buses did you say? 3?
3.
Oh,
In a row.
man. I just, I'm picturing, because like we have school buses drop kids off at work, and often it's just 2 school buses. Put a
Add
third
another
one in the
one.
row.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's not, doesn't seem right at all. That's
No,
amazing.
It's so long.
Oh, man.
And then to give the weight context, so
Yeah.
one blue whale, weighs the same as 30 adult African elephants do altogether.
Oh, boy.
So picture 30 elephants, African elephants, and they weigh the same as a single adult blue whale.
Okay. I mean, I really can't even picture how much an elephant weighs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's just one. Remember, there's about 15,000 of these whales in the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good number. I know at one point they were not doing so well, so that's
That's up from what it was. They
Yeah.
actually almost went extinct due to whaling and other issues, and then became protected in 1966. And there's been a lot of efforts towards preserving and helping with breeding populations and things, but there's still a lot that we don't know about blue whales, just because they're really big, but they're also mysterious enough that we're just like, they're not the easiest thing to try to find in the first place.
sure.
Yeah. Anyway, which is hilarious because they're huge.
Well, if you haven't noticed, the ocean is even bigger.
Right, and their range is the whole all of the oceans. They can be found in any
I
part
would
of the
love to
ocean.
see one in the wild.
Right?
I mean, I've been very close to humpback whales in the wild. I've been pretty close to sperm whales in the wild.
Cool.
I have not seen blue whales, and that would be that'd be really cool.
I need to go on a whaling tour. Like a whale spotting tour, not a whaling
Yeah,
tour.
you should be very careful how you phrase that. That it's a
Yep. Whale spotting.
whale watching
Whale
tour,
watching.
not a whaling tour.
Right.
There's
Those are different.
probably only if you were in Japan would you need to make that distinction. But of course, the whales that I saw in Norway was because that used to be a very, very large part of what went on there. Was a lot of whaling in Norway. Where I saw sperm whales was in Norway, and we were going out with people who used to hunt sperm whales, and now instead they take tourists out because they're like, well, this is actually more profitable.
Hey, that's awesome. Good. Glad we could do that for them.
Yeah.
So to give a little bit, not to give more context, but because they're so big, there are other pieces to the blue whale that it makes sense when you think about it, but you don't think about it. So because they are so large, they are actually one of the loudest animals on the planet. So we've covered this before with relative to like body size with the water boatmen. But
we sure did. I think that might have been episode 1.
Yep, it was pretty early. But blue whales, their call registers at 180 decibels.
Oh, that's wow. Now, did you run I know that sound travels different through water than it does through land. We just talked about through air. Sorry,
right?
We just talked about this with the drum episode. Did you come upon the equivalency for what that would be in the air?
So
I think you subtract 30 or 20 or what was it?
I don't know. I didn't look at that part, but I can tell you that it's 40 more decibels than a jet engine.
Okay. So loud. Real loud.
Yeah, because a jet engine gets to 140 decibels. So a blue whale is 180.
180.
Wow.
So probably actually out of the water, if you're talking about like in the air,
right?
It would still be louder than a jet engine.
Right.
That is
loud.
Absolutely nuts. Okay.
But it makes sense because they're large and they're don't huge, always travel in family groups either. So they do have to be able to call and try to find each other throughout the ocean.
Oh, from so far away.
Well, their call can be heard and reached up to 1,000 miles away.
Unfreaking real.
That is so...
Can you imagine, like, if I had to call you up when you're up, how many miles apart? How many miles apart do we live, Rachel?
We're like 300.
Okay. So imagine if I just went up my back door and I was like, hey, Rachel.
Right. And I would hear you.
And he'd be like, oh, Kirk's calling. Hey, man, what's going on? But we're 300 miles away. That would be nothing to a whale.
Right.
Nothing.
Absolutely. Just like, that's a casual phone conversation. Insane.
Unreal.
They also have the largest hearts of any animal that has lived, which makes sense because they're the largest animals, and you have to be able to pump blood through the entirety of the 3 lengths of school buses that is this animal.
Well, and you're diving deep, so you're under a lot of pressure, and your heart still has to work, and I mean, just outrageous.
So their hearts come in at about 400 pounds. Or about 180 kilograms, which
oh my gosh.
For context, why Kirk is laughing, that's like the size of an adult gorilla or a small bumper car. Like a bumper car.
Hold on.
Hold on. A bumper car.
Full stop, Rachel.
Uh-huh.
Did you just use a full-size bumper car as a unit of weight measurement on the show?
Yes.
How many people on Earth have ever lifted a bumper car?
That's fair.
Like, that's not something people have. I mean, it's an impressive number, but I'm not sure I have a good frame of reference for how much a bumper car weighs, other than like it's probably real heavy.
Right. Well,
did you find this reference somewhere? Someone else figures out, or did something you looked up? What weighs this much? I want to know where you got this from.
It was in measurement of reference while I was researching blue whales.
So somebody else
is like, a bumper car.
Who the hell is like, oh, you know what? I'm going to compare it to a bumper car. A small bumper car.
It made you think, didn't it?
Yeah. Every time I sit in a bumper car, I'm going to be like, look at this. It's like a blue whale heart. Let's go.
Exactly.
Except it's got a big pole on the back up, getting electricity from the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the weirdest things you've ever said on this show. And that's saying a lot.
I've said some weird things on this show.
God. All right. So bumper car heart. Got it. Go on.
Right. And its average heart rate when it's at depth, which can be up to 1,600 1,600 feet. It can be 2 minutes or 2 beats per minute.
Oh, jeez.
Yes, you heard that correctly. When it's at deep depths, the heart is only beating twice in a minute.
So, for reference, about the same heart rate as a hibernating woodchuck.
Yeah. Okay.
But this is an animal swimming around, living its best life.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely nuts.
When it gets up to surface, it's at about 37 beats per minute.
Okay.
Which is
interesting.
Which is, for context, the human resting heart rate should be around like 60, 70.
That's what mine was at the doctor on Friday, yeah.
There we go. So the fact that they are at half that and are 18 times the size of us, nuts. Makes sense, I guess. It's a big thing, but all of this being said, Kirk, since they do eat very small animals, we're going to go back into like their throat. We're moving up from their heart. We're going back into their mouth. They eat those really small critters. They eat really small krill. They're a very large animal. They're full of very large things. They have the largest babies in the world. Their esophagus is only 4 inches in diameter.
Okay. That seems pretty small.
Yeah.
For that big an animal.
Right?
I suppose they're eating tiny stuff, so...
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so they're eating really tiny stuff. All of the water gets pushed out through that baleen, and everything else just goes down their very, very thin gullet.
So wait, are you saying that stories about who Jonah and the whale aren't true?
That was
because
a
person
sperm whale.
That was yes, it's probably even smaller.
Yeah.
If you get swallowed by a sperm whale, you're just dead.
Yeah.
First of all, they're going to chew
Moby Dick
you up.
and such. That's not a baleen
Well, no, I was
whale.
thinking of Jonah and the whale, not Moby Dick.
Right.
I don't know what kind of whale Jonah was supposed to be inside, but if the largest whale in the world only has a 4-inch esophagus, you ain't fitting through there.
No. Which is wild because they can eat up to 6 tons of krill in a day. So that's wild that they have to fit that much food down their gullet. just
Wow.
okay. Feels unnecessary.
That's just like it's what the size of a sewer pipe. It's just like a nonstop flow of
pretty
food
much
going down the gullet. Yeah.
they are constantly
Wow.
eating, which I don't blame them. I would too. If I'm that big
mean,
and I have to like get
you
my
have to,
body
yeah.
from one side to another, nah, man, I'm eating all of the time.
Eating on the go.
Yeah. So that's all I have for you all this week is the blue whale and just how insane that is. The fact that we haven't
Cool.
covered it, but at least we covered it before 200. Amazing. Love it. Mwah, chef's kiss.
Sweet. Thank you for doing that. That's very cool.
Yeah. My sources this week were Wikipedia, Monterey Bay Aquarium, National Geographic, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Fisheries. All excellent. And yes, one of those, and I'm 98% sure it was not Wikipedia, compared the heart to a bumper car. So.
Bravo. Bravo.
With that,
Woo.
that's it, Kirk. That's this week's episode. Next week,
Amazing.
200.
Thanks for finishing out 199 with us, everybody. We start the next 200 tomorrow. Well, I suppose
Next
no,
week?
none of that's right. Next week. And actually, we don't start the next 200 until episode 201. But,
Feels like semantics, Kirk.
it does. It's been a lot. It's been a long journey. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.